greetings to everyone as well. We're looking forward to this webinar. There's been a lot of interest in our product, those applications in specific that use speech recognition. And so we've pulled all those little pieces of the apps together to put this kind of combination webinar together. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how it interacts with the rest of the product, which is the with a twist bit. So if we just sort of jump into it here, speech recognition is actually not an application, it's a technology. So you write applications that, some applications you write that work on a screen and you click a mouse to make them work. Others, you type in commands, and in this particular webinar we're going to be looking at applications that use speech recognition as commands to make the various things happen in our product. We think it's a technology that's really reached its time. We've been doing this for 15 years. In the early days, speech recognition was much more problematic. And everybody probably has a story about a speech recognition app in the early days that didn't work so well. But today, with the advances in the technology, the applications are very well behaved. And now there's things we can do using speech, particularly when we're talking about mobile interactions from people not sitting at a desk, that can be much more powerful, because there are just some things it's very difficult to type into a device or to use DTMF keys to do. So we're going to look about automating calls and automating some of the functions we do. And there's a number of reasons people want to do this. Certainly saving money in today's economy is something that people are interested in. We'll see how you can do some of that. Also, for some people who don't really want a speech front end for general use, they find that by turning on some of these applications after hours, they actually get more functionality within their enterprise than they could get. It probably doesn't justify all the time having employees stay for the longer hours, but the automation sometimes fills in quite nicely. And we've built these applications, like I say, over the 15 years to encourage a very natural kind of interface. But I want to make sure people understand, contrary to what the movies would have you believe, you don't really talk to a computer in the sense of it, you can have a conversation. This is what we call command and control. In other words, in any particular place in any of our applications, there are a set of commands that the application will recognize. It's not like a human being where it can take things out of context. So there is a little bit of a learning curve, very little for the front end for the speech automated attendant, and just a little bit for the user interface as well. And we'll talk about that as we talk about the various pieces. But our goal here is to create a very easy interface. We're going to be talking about some of our Atom functionality as we get down a little further. And the two goals of Atom are to make it easier on the user and easier on the caller. And the speech interface definitely plays into that set of desires. So if we look at the kind of things that are out there with speech today, everybody's done speech over the phone for applications. There's a lot of self-service apps. A lot of call centers use it, sometimes only as a front end, sometimes as an attempt to actually complete a transaction, so to lower the number of bodies that they need to have online. Airlines, banks, all of those people. And that's something that's been out there for years. Lately as well, most of our mobile devices now have speech interfaces. Certainly, even if you don't have an Apple and haven't used Siri, you've seen the commercials, where the concept of being able to talk to your device sometimes is more effective. And not only Apple, but Androids and Windows Mobile all have very nice interfaces. And it's not that they do everything you want with a speech interface, but there are definitely some things in there, such as if you have a mobile navigation app on one of those devices, the ability for it to take speech commands while you're driving, very, very helpful. And then some of us actually have speech on our desk. Dictation was probably the most popular one. Dragon systems out there for dictation is something that's been out there for years, and depending on what it is you're doing, a lot of people find it very helpful. And then the whole concept of a non-visual desktop access for the impaired is another piece where many people, Microsoft being one of them, have spent a lot of time and money. So the use of speech out there now, we feel is pretty well accepted. The technology's reached a very high level of reliability, and I think it's ready to take its place in the enterprise to once again do some productivity enhancements that you really couldn't do without it. From our point of view, those of you that don't know our history, we actually rolled two companies together about 10 years ago. And one was a voicemail, a traditional enterprise voicemail company, and one was a leading-edge speech recognition solutions company. And what we've done in the meantime is take those two technologies and, of course, merge them into the one product, the CX Enterprise product. So it's been 15 years for us building speech solutions. And what that means is, of course, we've got a lot of experience in understanding not just the technology, but the social interface piece. We understand how to create commands that make sense, things that people will intuitively be saying, such that there's not a big learning curve, but at the same time, how to tune an application to stay away from some of the pitfalls, like two command phrases that sound very similar that end up giving you a frustrating experience. Now, while we've got all this time in the industry, we did not write a speech recognition engine. The actual business of listening to a phrase, understanding what it is, and figuring out what command is appropriate, that's really an area where there are some very, very specialist company. Nuance is the biggest one. Nuance is the world's recognized leader in server-level recognition. Now, it's a little confusing because Nuance has applications they sell as well. We do not use the Nuance applications, but we do use their engine because it's the best engine in the market. So our application does all the work up front, and then we actually pass the commands to Nuance, which returns the appropriate values so that we can have that high level of accuracy. And there's just a lot of advantage in using Nuance in the market because not only have they bought everyone else in the industry, pretty much, but this engine they have has been under development for a lot of years, and it's an engine that it's very, very specialized. As an example, if you look at somebody like Dragon Systems, that interface is designed for people sitting at a computer wearing a headset. So it's assuming a fairly high level of signal coming in. The Nuance engine is for mobile applications. It understands you might be in your car. It might understand there might be high background noise. So it's been optimized for those kind of things. One of the latest rounds of technology with Nuance is handling mobile calls. Mobile calls are full of gaps. We don't necessarily hear them. Our ears kind of fill them in. But the actual concept of dropping out packets when the network gets busy is one that's out there. When it gets bad, you hear it and understand it. But even when it's good, that signal is different. So using somebody like Nuance is how we get that high level of accuracy in the widest range of environments. We're going to look at two specific areas. Our voice-driven automated attendant, our front end for a speech automated attendant, and then our user interface under the personal assistant software license. All of these applications we're going to talk about are multilingual capable. We'll kind of look at what that means as we get a little further down the road. But the concept for us is you should be able to take a look at what we're offering today, figure out where it fits in your organization, and then pick and choose any pieces that you might find interesting. So if you look at the automated attendant, that automated attendant on the voicemail side has been around forever. Enter the extension number and we'll transfer you kind of functionality. But today, business is you have a wider range of contacts. You don't necessarily know what their extension number is, and spelling the last name is something that's proven to be very unpopular. So what you can now do is roll out an automated attendant that's speech-driven. And in our product, the user directory that's there by default when you create all the users on the system can now be searched. So if somebody says a name, we can go search through that directory, figure out who it is, and transfer that call based on a wide range of rules and applications that we'll look at a little later. Of course, when we're doing that, there's things to consider, and this is where this years of experience comes in. One of the things is not everybody's name is immediately, if you're reading it off a business card, when you pronounce it, it's not immediately obviously how you say it, and therefore you need to be able to tune the names. So you might have to go in for somebody who has a very unusual name, spelling as opposed to pronunciation, and go in and phonetically put an adjustment in. And you can put multiple adjustments for all the different ways somebody might say a name. The goal there, obviously, is to increase the accuracy of recognition. We can go down at a very basic level and actually tune it syllable by syllable, but for most names, it's pretty easy just to go ahead and put a phonetic equivalent in. And this includes things like adding honorifics, like doctor, professor, and if you have somebody who's like he's at in a university, and he's a doctor, and his name is William Todd, people might be calling him Dr. Todd, William Todd, Dr. William Todd, Bill Todd. You can put all those aliases in to make sure that it's an easy experience for the caller. And then, of course, the last challenge is you might have multiple William Todds or John Smiths in an organization. The larger the organization, the more likely that is. So you need to be able to handle what's called disambiguation. In other words, if I have two William Todds, how do I help the caller get to the right one? And we have a very nice layer of software called groups that lets us do things like break users up into functional departments, cities, locations, anything like that. So you might say, William Todd, and it will come back and say, do you mean William Todd in admissions or William Todd in physics? So that's the kind of functionality you see come into a product after many years of development. We'll compare ourselves to some of our competition a little at the end, and you'll see these are the kind of areas where you have to be very careful in looking at how a vendor supports those, or you'll end up with a system that's just not that easy to use. The outside caller interface has a different set of challenges because it's more than just speaking a name. There are commands involved. So you need to make sure you build a grammar that's intuitive, first of all. Say, if somebody wants to get into their voicemail, it makes perfect sense for them to be able to say, get my voicemail messages or get new messages. So you have to build a nice grammar that does that. And you can build in as many commands as you want. The problem is the more commands, you have issues now with misrecognition. So the goal with a speech command set is to get just the right number of commands that are intuitively accurate from what a user would say, but where there's not very many conflicts, so the speed of using the interface can be very high because there's very few misrecognitions. And then outside of that, we're going to talk about the additional options that we put in there. We're going to lump this all together towards the end in what we call Atom. Atom is our new AVST Total Office Manager concept. It's something that's driven with one of our licenses, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Atom is an incredible new set of solutions. It's actually probably the first full unified communications product set out there that really does what unified communications is supposed to do. It really goes out and reads all your other systems, and using context from all the other systems you have makes the experience of accessing calls, messages, etc. much more easy. And we're going to look at how it does that from a speech point of view. But to get a better view of all that's available for Atom, you should keep looking at your email, because you'll receive some emails down the road where we'll be doing one of these focused on Atom. Atom's far more complex than something I can cover in just a couple of slides here, but I will be pointing out some of the parts, and hopefully that'll generate some interest. So let's take a look at the Speech Automated Attendant, because the Speech Automated Attendant is sort of a starting place in terms of what people might actually want to do. And so the way we'll do this is we'll actually let you listen to a little session here.
At any time during this greeting, you can simply say the name of the person or the department you want to reach. For a list of departments, please say options.
John Tyler.
Who's calling, please?
Mark Reed.
1 moment, please.
So that's just a very, very simple automated attendant session. Now, this is all very flexible. Certainly the greeting can be different. In many cases, the greeting will be more complex because besides just names, you may want individual departments called out by name and things like that. But the concept is the same. We play a greeting to the caller. We make sure in that greeting we let them know what we need them to say. In this case, they said a username. We then took that username and went into our directory. First, we sent that username into Nuance. It returned a value. We then took that value and searched our user directory, and basically from there, we now know that John Tyler has call screening turned on his mailbox, so we prompt the caller who's calling, we record the name, and now Atom's going to kick in, as we'll see a little later. We decide what we want to do with that call. The very simplest thing, of course, is we'll simply transfer the call to the user, and in many cases that's what you want. But there's a lot of other functionality that can come into play, because unlike all of our competition, our applications are integrated. We don't have a speech server that does one and a voicemail server that does another. This is all one application. So that gives us not only context with reading your other applications like your calendar and your instant messaging engine, but it also gives us a set of rules that the user has to make this experience much more rewarding for the caller and much more efficient for the user. And we'll see how that works. But it all starts with a nice, simple speech recognition session. Now, if you look at the speech recognition, we talked about the directory. There's a couple of things we do here. For a lot of people, they don't want an external-facing speech rec automated attendant. They believe in a more personal touch, at least during business hours. So what they tend to do, if they deploy our product, is deploy it after hours for more extended coverage and deploy it for internal users. If you talk to the attendant pool in an average large enterprise and ask what percentage of the calls are from internal people looking for someone, you'll probably be surprised to find it somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 35%. So one of the easiest things to do to take a workload off that group is to deploy a speech rec automated attendant, and just have it for internal use. During the day, people can call a number and basically say a name and get transferred instead of having to interrupt the attendants. So we talked about support for alias names and disambiguation. This becomes very important in enterprises with multiple locations as well, because the group support we have means I can deploy a large CX system that's covering 3 cities. So I have elements in 3 separate cities. That's one of the things our architecture does, all tied together into a single system. And you could put a group together for just the employees in one city so that when somebody called in and said that name, that's the only names it would search. Now, you might want to search all cities and do transfers from city to city. It really depends on sort of what the structure is, sort of the business logic that's involved. But you have the ability to do these individual directories. Once again, this is the kind of structure that comes from spending years deploying this with customers and having them tell us what their problems are and trying to solve it. By default, all of the names for the users can be in the directory. You can add departmental entries in the directory. So if you want to transfer to different departments, different buildings, different functions. We also have an API that will let us centralize the directory and synchronize it with some other external source. So we have a lot of people that say, you know, I'm using PeopleSoft, or I'm using an HR program, or LDAP, and what we want is, as soon as we add somebody in that directory, we want to have that put into the, the user so it's recognized for transfers. And we have an API that would let us build some custom software to do that for you. And that's kind of the more you get into deploying these kind of functions, the more that type of functionality becomes good. Besides just speaking names, one of the things that makes our product unique is the full menu support for everything that we had back when we were a DTMF only system. You know, you've all called in and said, hello, welcome to my company, heard the greeting, press 1 for sales, 2 for service, 3 to talk to an operator, whatever those commands were. All of those, besides just a directory transfer, can be enabled as well. So I can have a greeting that says, good morning, thank you for calling my company. Please say the first and last name of the person you're trying to reach. For sales, say sales or press 7. You can leave the DTMF functionality in if it makes you feel comfortable. So ours is a much more complete implementation. It's not just a name directory. It's a full call processing system that's fully speech enabled. That gives us some advantages, particularly if we're replacing the traditional kind of automated attendant that you have some business logic built into that you don't want to lose that. We're able to maintain that as well. Colleges, higher ed, one of the absolute first places that started rolling this out. If you think about them in, with a campus environment and all the student names and all the departments, I mean, they have always had a challenge. There's a pool of operators at most of these places that are kept quite busy. So this was probably one of our first areas where we made a lot of entry. And speech automated attendant to route callers to buildings, faculty, students in a few cases, not a lot of cases, all of that's available. And what every one of these institutions has told us afterwards, and we have a number of case studies you can see that where they talk about how well this worked, is a reduction in operator traffic. For colleges, the primary drive is cost-based, and that's to make it simple. I mean, it makes it a better experience for the outside caller, but honestly, it's driven by a cost reduction. They can take, the amount of work that they give to that attendant pool that's outside of answering calls and increase that, and that ends, in a reduction in what their expenses are. And that's what they're really looking for. We have quite a few colleges that we can give you as a reference. So the second piece, of course, is besides the users, we have the whole outside caller interface that's pretty important as well. And this is somewhat about reducing costs. It's also about making time more productive for users, giving them some of the tools from their phone that they only have from their desk. And as we look at kind of the way this goes down, is we end up talking about what a user can do using speech that they really couldn't do as effectively using DTMF commands. So let's take a look at a couple of examples here and kind of get a feeling for what somebody can use. Now in this case, this is the outside caller interface. One of the places where a lot of speech automated attendants fall flat is they call, they ask you to speak the name, and then after, if you don't get through, then they're not speech rec anymore, because what they really did was a blind transfer. Now it forwarded into the voicemail that's in the DTMF voicemail, and the callers get confused because they can't speak to it anymore. Once again, that integrated system that we have allows us to handle it quite a bit differently.
Who's calling, please?
Mark Reed.
One moment, please. John Tyler. does not answer, please say, locate, leave a message, try another person, or operator.
Now, obviously, that music you heard during the transfer process, I shortened down with a little editing because you don't really need to sit and listen to 30 seconds of music as we go out and try and find that person. But the concept's the same. And now what happens if the call is not complete is the user is still in our system. We still have a speech interface. And not only is it speech, so it makes sense to them, but we can offer a lot of options very easily. So in the case where, let's say, John Tyler, we'll use him as a name, maybe that's who they were looking for, has a rule that says first ring my desk and then if I don't answer, ring my mobile phone. I can set that up in this kind of scenario where comes in, John Tyler doesn't answer, and now if the user says locate, it'll go out to the other devices or telephone numbers associated with the user. That's part of the find me, follow me functionality. Once again, all in a single product, so it's an integrated experience. And then simple things like leaving a message, or many cases, people, what they really try and think about now is how do I get back to that directory again so I can try the other person I'm dealing with. So we're just going to prompt them, say try another person. That'll take them right back to the main level directory, and they can try to contact someone else. Or operator, which is, one of the most common options, obviously, if you don't get who you're looking for. So the ability to take the outside caller and keep them in the system and keep them in a speech application makes this a much more friendly application. That was one of the biggest complaints people had in the early days of speech rec automated attendant was how suddenly it wasn't speech anymore, and people would get into somebody's greeting and they'd be trying to talk to it and they'd get all frustrated. They don't really understand the architecture involved, so it's just easier if we do it that way. Now let's look at the user interface, because the user interface is probably the more complex piece, and this is a piece where people spend a lot of time thinking about how they would roll this out, how many of their people they would roll it out to. So let's take a look at what the experience is, then we can talk a little bit about where the value is. So to do this, we're going to talk a little bit about Atom. Atom is the AVST Total Office Manager, and this is a packaging of functionality together. And let me explain the concept at a very high level. Today, for most people, when you go to work, we all sort of work the same. And what I mean by that is we get to work, we fire up our desktop, we look into email, we kind of do a triage, we find the most important item that's kind of staring out at us, we open it up, we read it, we maybe call a coworker to get some information on what's going on, maybe set up a meeting in our calendar, and then we move on. And that knowledge worker loop, that's what the industry calls that, is something we're all very familiar with. It's a pretty productive way of working. Part of the problem we have when we step away from our desk is we don't have those tools. Yes, we have a mobile device and we can read email and we can make a phone call, but that whole integrated work pattern is disrupted. So part of what we try and do with Atom is create virtual environments that let you keep that knowledge worker loop and basically do it from whatever device you're choosing to use, which is probably controlled by your circumstances. So when we talk about Atom, we're really talking about bringing together all of the pieces. This is where we start talking about the most complete unified communication solution. So we have a speech interface that lets you do that same kind of productive work maybe when you're in your car, and it's multilingual, which is helpful as well. We have a full unified messaging interface, both from the speech interface and from a DTMF interface, so you can, once again, access those messages and triage that email and do that all in any environment, not just when you're sitting in front of your desk. We have a lot of mobile applications, mobile number protection. We have the most context-aware unified communications there is. We're going to look at that at the very end. And what that means is when we look at getting messages or processing calls, we're going to reach out into your enterprise and touch your calendar, your instant messaging system, your mobile location, all of those pieces, and let you create rules so that your calls and messages are handled in a specific way. And what that means is if you set the rules engine up, as a user, you don't have to do anything. You can go through your business day and everything works the way you want it without you having to think of moving calls to a different location or handling things differently. That's one of the real advantages of Atom. And of course, the key piece of Atom is the speech piece as well. If we look at Atom, it's all of the things we do tied together plus the context of making them work more efficiently based on who we are, where we are, and what we're doing in our day. So message management, incoming and outgoing call handling, access to the calendar and contacts. Let's face it, the two most accurate databases people tend to keep up are their own calendar and contacts. We can't get them to keep up database settings in our system very well. That's That's just the way things are. But if we can leverage the information in those systems that they are accurately maintaining, that gives us a very, very powerful tool to use. So Atom does all of that. And from what we're talking about for this presentation, we're talking about the speech interface that does all of that. So we have a nice marketing brochure you can get out on our website, and it kind of explains Atom, and it talks, one of the slides here is this one. Atom hears you, simply speak up. And the concept is speech commands are not only easy to use, but there are things you can do with a speech command that don't make sense to try and do remotely with a DTMF interface. So imagine, one of those down there is trying to schedule a meeting at 2 o'clock and inviting 2 of your coworkers and 3 people from your contacts list to it, and try to do that with a DTMF interface. Speech makes some of these things possible, not just easy, but possible. So the goal here is to deliver an interface that lets you do all those things you used to do so easily at your desk with graphical user interfaces, but do them with a speech interface. So we're mostly focusing on the speech from the remote user's point of view at this point. So let's go ahead and kind of listen to one of the call features. So one of the great things about Atom and our interface is it's not just messages. It's really, really heavy on the kind of things we can do with calls.
You have a call from Mark Reed. Please say accept call, reject call, acknowledge, transfer call, or review call.
Acknowledge.
Please record a brief acknowledgement.
Hi, Mark. I'm in a meeting, and we'll call you back when I get out in about an hour.
So there's so many concepts here, it's hard to decide what to talk about first. So one of the great things here is I now know who the call is from. How many times have you been really busy heading into a meeting and your phone rings, and if you don't happen to have memorized everybody's A&I number, it's really hard to decide whether that call is more or less important than what you're doing. So by having our call screening and having it play that name, you now can make a decision on what you want to do with that call. And because we have some nice speech commands, we can offer you more decisions than just take it or send it to voicemail. And that's what the first 2 commands are. Accept call will connect you. Reject it will send the caller to your voicemail. But acknowledge will actually let you record a personal message for that caller. So this is a perfect scenario. You have an important customer, can't afford to take that call because maybe you're walking into a meeting, but you definitely want to acknowledge them, and now you can play them a personal message. Transfer call would be another option where if you knew that you were actually working with Mark Reed and you had another coworker who could help him out, you could say transfer call and then speak the coworker's name, and that would actually let that call get handled efficiently while you could go about what you're wanting to do. So incoming call handling as well as making outgoing calls, much more powerful with this kind of interface. And this is a combination of context and speech and all the different elements that we have. That integration of all of our applications on a single platform lets us do things that nobody else can really handle. Now if we look at kind of the more traditional piece of messaging that we're associated with, let's see what it's like to sort of manage your messages.
What would you like to do?
Get new messages.
One moment, please. You have 3 unread messages. Message number 1, an email message from Mark Reed. Message subject, the Martin Project. Message body, hi John, we need to talk about the Martin Project. Call me as soon as you can.
And this is kind of a very typical message that you would get. We certainly could have showed it with a voice message as well. What's interesting here is all the things I can do at this point. I've listened to the message. So many times messages are a call to action as opposed to actual content. Voice messages even more than email messages. So either as a voice message or an email, once I heard this, as a user, I could simply say, call back. And it would place a phone call to the person that left this message. Now, assuming that the person that left me this message is in my contacts, what the system will do is it'll go out and it'll see how many phone numbers I have, and if I have business and mobile, it'll come back and say which number, business or mobile. I can say mobile, and it'll now actually connect me to that caller. And if it's somebody from my system, I can do the same thing as well. I also could forward this message that's an email or reply to it, even from an external sender. If this was one of my customers and they're not really on my system, I could say reply to message, and I could basically record a voice reply that would say, listen, yeah, I'm going to be in a meeting. I'm always in a meeting, it seems. I'll be out in an hour, and I'll call you then. So it's so much more functionality because of the integrated nature. And all of this is driven from simple speech calls. One of the things that we've kind of expanded out into over the last couple of years is access to the calendar. The calendar is one of the things we do a lot with the calendar. There's only a couple of things that happen, I think, regularly for most users, but there's a lot that we can do with the calendar.
What would you like to do?
Get my appointments for today.
One moment, please. You have one appointment on Tuesday, July 9th. Appointment number 1 is a meeting scheduled by Alan Thomas starting on Tuesday, July 9th at 2 p.m. for 30 minutes. Subject: software update discussion.
So if you look at the ability to read your calendar from the phone, this is in no way a replacement for using your calendar from a graphical interface. Being able to view a calendar and quickly make appointments is a powerful tool from a graphical interface. But imagine yourself coming out and getting in your car in the morning, start for work, you have a 45-minute commute perhaps, like so many of us do, and you say, what are my appointments for today? And it will read your appointments and it kind of sets your day. You might get meeting requests, and you can actually accept a meeting request or decline it or mark it as tentative. You can even create a meeting. If you got in your car and you're headed to work and you realize, you know what, I need to talk to 2 of my coworkers today, you could say, create a meeting at 2 o'clock. It would ask you who you wanted to invite. And you can invite other people on your system or other people from your contacts, and they'll all get meeting requests sent out. So another powerful tool to give you more functionality when you're away from your desk. And this is another one that could only really be done effectively using speech commands. Contacts is another piece we use. We use contacts for a lot. Let's first look at what the process is for listening to contacts.
What would you like to do?
Get contact info.
Please say the name of the contact for which you want any additional information.
Mark Reed.
Get contact information for Mark Reed. Which number or item? Please say one of the following: business, mobile, email address.
Email address.
Email address is markreed@telman.com.
So this is a good place to talk about a couple of things. One is, I'm showing you all the prompts. I'm letting you go through and hear all the prompts because it's really nice in the beginning to know how well the system steps you through. But at any time, you can talk over the prompts. We support barge in. So what I would actually do is say, what would you like to do? And as please, as soon as it said, please say the name, I'd say Mark Reed. As soon as I heard get, I'd say email address, and it would read me. You don't really go through this as an experienced user, but it's nice to know that it's there. Now, the contact info I'm talking about here is for people where they put a system in and we're synchronized with their Exchange contacts, their Office 365 contacts, their Notes contacts, their Gmail contacts, any of those. And we actually not only use those contacts for something like this, but I can send new messages or forward existing messages. Or if I get an incoming call from somebody and the ANI is listed in their contacts, I can capture their name so I can display it for incoming call information. So we have a great set of applications that focus, once again, on context, on our ability to go out and read the other information in your systems. So if you look at the other special features, we've talked about some of these. You can create new meetings and appointments. You can invite users from contacts as well as your own system users to those meetings. I can call, forward messages, all of that because I have access to that information. The speech interface also lets me maintain my mailbox setting. It's very easy for me to go in and record a new greeting, change my message notifications, that change my password, that sort of thing. I can also choose to record incoming and outgoing calls. So when I had that call come in, instead of saying acknowledge, I could have said accept and record. And now I would have that conversation, and that entire conversation would be recorded and put into my mailbox. I could also make an outgoing call and choose to record that when I did it as well. If I'm on the phone, maybe I'm listening, I'm on my 45-minute drive, I'm listening to email, and somebody calls me, it'll actually let me answer that call. I'll get a little tone in my ear, tell me who it is, and I'll say accept call, and now I'm talking on that call, and that person says, so I can't remember, we have a meeting on Thursday. What time is that meeting? You can put that call on hold and go in and say, what are my meetings on Thursday? It'll read you that information back. and then you can go back and take that call off hold and say, yeah, it's at 2 o'clock, so we'll meet up an hour before, at that normal Starbucks, that kind of thing. So the ability to not only interrupt what functionality you're doing with a total hands-free kind of connection, but the ability to go out and check various things and get back to a call, another powerful feature. And there's so many more features here that we certainly don't have time to cover. The ability to put the system into a suspended mode. For me, this is the most useful when I'm driving around and I decide I need to refresh my Diet Coke. So I pull into a drive-through window, but I'm listening to messages. Right as I get up to the window, I say, I can put Call Express on hold. And what that does is it turns off speech recognition, so it won't get confused when it hears me order, but it leaves keyword spotting on, which means I can say a particular phrase and get back into the system. So once again, 15 years in terms of designing these applications means this is not a path one. This is something that we're very good at. These are lots of these systems out there, and customers have been giving us feedback for years. We talked a little bit about multilingual. We've just actually in the latest release finally gotten the application threaded correctly for multilingual. We could do one language at a time before, and now we can do up to 5 languages. And supported on the system today are obviously U.S. English, North American Spanish, French Canadian, and for other people outside the country, UK English or Australian English, and also Swedish, because we have a large OEM arrangement with Astra, who has a lot of business up in that part of the world. So as we've talked about all these features, while we've talked about speech as an automated attendant and a user interface, I've talked through all that about how it's all integrated and what the advantage is. And this is one of the most subtle differences to look at. If you're looking at going out and deploying an application, this is the one that if you don't stop and think about it, you probably won't understand the advantage. Almost everybody we compete with has a speech automated attendant application. It usually runs on a separate physical server, or it runs on the same server, but it's actually a separate application. And the way it runs is it does blind transfers. So you call in, you say a name, and it transfers it out. And now if somebody doesn't answer, it'll forward back into the voicemail. And I talked about that a little. You lose the speech functionality usually when you get back in the voicemail. It's different voices sometimes, even because it's different products. But what you really lose is the lack of integration. So you're not going to have call screening. You're not going to have the find me, follow me list that can be implemented by this. Those advanced calling options like acknowledge and transfer, none of that's going to be there. And no context-based solutions. Here's the thing. When somebody calls into our system and says, Neil Butler, it's not necessarily going to do what I told it, what I programmed it, because context is going to say, you know what? Neil's in a meeting right now. He has told me when he's in a meeting, don't transfer calls to his desk. So all of that comes from integration, and no one else has that. And in our case, because we are a single solution, while we can do blind transfers, and there's a time to do those, certain kinds of applications work best with those, but we also can do fully screened and supervised transfers. And that's what gives us the ability to do all these really fancy apps. And if you're looking at adding a solution, if you're saying, oh, it's time for me to go out and add a standalone speech automated attendant, look very carefully at the limitations you'll get from using something that's just that. We are a unified communications solution suite, and we allow you to leverage all these pieces together, and it just makes a major difference. So if you think of our call flow, what happens is somebody comes in, they come onto our platform, we have speech automated attendant, they say a name, and now what we're actually going to do is we're going to go out and say, okay, so we know who this is for. What is it that they want to happen? They want call screening. Okay, so let me prompt the caller for their name. They have a find me, follow me list. So I'm not just going to do a blind transfer because I want to try their desk, and then I want to try their mobile phone, and then I want to try their link client. All of those things can be part of the rules. And the first thing I'll check is their working hours. They might have defined where between 8 and 5 they want this to happen, but after hours they don't want that. Their calendar status might say, oh, what they want when they're in a meeting is to play a prompt to the caller. Hi, Neil Butler's in a meeting and won't be available till 4 o'clock. And then maybe they want to send out something to actually tell them all the information about the meeting, or maybe they simply want to take a message. Maybe the instant messaging status from Link says, it says he's in today, but he hasn't touched his computer, so I'm going to play a prompt just to let that person know. Or maybe the mobile device location. Yeah, we actually can tell where you are physically if you have our mobile client loaded. So while the rule says ring his desk, he's not here. I know he's not here. Oh, look, he's at home. And when he's at home, the rule gets changed to ring his link client, because that's what he uses when he's away. And then the whole thing where I can actually choose when I get presented the call to record that call. All that comes from being integrated. So now let me wrap up this kind of functionality and what you can get by talking about the perfect unified communications user's day. This is two concepts here. One is much more information to the caller. Let's make that experience for the caller more productive than just a personal greeting that says, hey, I'm not here, beep. That's not much help to anybody. And then secondly, let's minimize what the user has to do to have all this work. And so for that to work, we'll start out, walk out of our house, climb in our car, head to work. Automatically, our calls are now presented to us through our mobile phone. We have a Bluetooth setup. We can be quite comfortable in that 45-minute commute. Now, I might choose to get in and be listening to messages during this. Doesn't matter. I'll still receive my calls. Or I might be quietly listening to music on my way to work. But if a call comes in, it'll come in, and I'll know who it is, and I can decide to take that call or not. I did not go into my system and say, please send my calls. It happened automatically, and it happened from the mobile device location feature. When you walked away from your house, we have a way to know that, and we went ahead and started to route your calls right to your mobile phone. You walk into the office, once again, we know that from the mobile device location, and you're at your desk, so we go ahead and handle calls just in a normal way. A couple hours in, you go into a meeting. And now I've gone into a meeting, and I know that from my calendar. These are all different context entries. And as a user, I might just have it set up to say I'm in a meeting, I'll be back at a certain time, and then I don't want to take calls. As an option, in our case, once again, the integration of all these features is I can choose when I'm in a meeting to do silent call screening through the data channel on my mobile client. And what this does is I'm sitting in a meeting, just like I'm monitoring important voicemail messages quietly in a meeting, now I'm watching calls. And when a call comes in, and it's from John Tyler, I can reach down and hit one of these buttons. And what these buttons do, in this case, are play greetings. They play, Neil Butler was unable to take your call, but we'll call you back in 15 minutes. I also have the option of taking the call, stepping out of the meeting, or sending it to voicemail. So a powerful combination of context and mobile application. I'm done. I go back to my desk. My calls start ringing at my desk phone. I head out to lunch. Now, I might choose during lunch to have my calls automatically go to voicemail, or I could have them to automatically go to my mobile phone. It's really up to the user, but once it's set up, they don't do anything. When they walk out of the office, it changes because the mobile device tells them where that user is. Now, I come back in, but I don't get back to my desk, and this is a very typical scenario. I'm going to be hit with the hallway discussion where somebody grabs me halfway down the hall, and we spend 20 minutes standing in the hall talking about something. Now, my mobile device location says I am in the office. It knows I'm there, but my instant messaging client says yes, but he has not got back to his desk yet. So now I have a choice. What I do is when I'm in my office, I will always go ahead and ring my phone. But in the case of when it says I'm away from my desk from instant messaging, but I'm in the office, I will change that to ring my mobile phone because I know I'm out in the hall somewhere. And I'll change the prompt I play to the caller because the expectation is different. I might not be able to take the call, but certainly giving the caller a little more information is helpful. I decide to head home, work the rest of the day at home. I'm in my office at home. As soon as I climb in my car, my calls go to my mobile phone. Why? Because my mobile phone told me I'm not in the office and I'm not at home yet, so send them to the mobile phone. And then I do get in and I basically go up, fire up my computer, put my headset in, and because I'm at home and it's during working hours, my calls are sent to my link client because that's what I use when I'm home. When working hours ends, in my case 6 o'clock, calls stop coming to me and go to voicemail automatically. All of that happened with context. All of that happened because we can reach out and touch the other systems that the user is good about maintaining. They carry their mobile phone with them, so we know their location. They're very good about keeping their calendar accurate. Their instant messaging knows whether they've been sitting there working on their machine. All of that is available. It's all integrated. So that's what we consider a perfect day for a unified communications user. Now, when you look at our system, it's not like we would say, oh, you know what you should do is rip out everything you have and put our stuff in everywhere. That's not usually what the budget is set up for, the projects that you're working on. So keep in mind, while I have talked about this as a single integrated solution, and it is, everything I've talked about can run on one physical server in an environment that's of the right size. But a lot of people tend to deploy it. You might have a legacy voicemail replacement initiative. What I need to do right now is get rid of my old Meridian Mail or my old Octel. And you can choose to put CX in just for that functionality. And later, when the UC initiative comes to play, you can talk about adding the licensing and the speech and those pieces and add all those other functionalities we talked about. And as a third level, which we didn't talk about at all in this presentation, we do have some webinars on this as well, this platform also comes with a complete API, meaning we can do all these things, we can use all these functions we talk about to do custom applications. So if you have a web portal and you want to have a click-to-call functionality from your web portal, we can do that. If you want customers to call in and access a database, put in their account number and access a database and have something read back to them, we can do that. So the whole business process customization piece is available as well. So it really is a matter of you deciding what you're looking at today, which pieces you want, and then just knowing that if you pick this platform, your ability to implement all the rest of this comes with it as well. And then I'm always happy right here because I get to do the best slide of all. Let's see if we have any questions.
We do have questions. So the first question, does the CXE speech recognized automated attendant include professional recordings of names and prompts, or is it computer-generated voice? So a lot of these questions, Neil, by the way, have kind of been answered during the webinar, but
sure.
Go ahead
no,
and
we can
just
go through
them.
Yeah. Never hurts to hear something twice. So the way this works is if you put the system in, and it's the voicemail system, all the users have gone in and they've done their name recordings, right? They go into their mailbox to record their name, they record their greeting. So that's the name we'll use when we do the speech automated attendant. If they haven't done that, depending on how we implement the system, sometimes no names will be heard. So if you buy this as a speech automated attendant only, with no other functionality, then we're going to be doing blind transfers, and they won't hear the name from us. They'll speak the name, it'll say, "1 moment, please," and send it out. We do have the ability for every application that we have that if the user hasn't recorded their name, we will use text-to-speech to play that name. It's just a better idea, if it's a voicemail in particular, for those users to go in and record their names. But both those options are available.
Okay, next question. How interoperable is it with PBXs like Mitel? How does it connect?
Anything that we integrate with, all these applications I just described work with. And the anything we integrate with list is basically everything that's out there. I don't know of a currently deployed business-type phone system out there that we don't have an integration with. We certainly have 3 or 4 integrations with Mitel. So any version of Mitel you have, almost no matter how far back it goes, yes, we can integrate with it. And everything, once we integrate with it, everything, including the link transfer piece and everything else I talked about, works with every PBX.
Okay, next question. Your slide mentioned federated presence. Can you elaborate?
Oh, yeah, I should have gone in and changed that. Federated is perhaps a misleading word. In other words, we do not put our presence information into another presence database. What we do is read information out. And at this point in time, we only read information from Link or OCS. And what we do is, when a call comes in, we ping that user's status. We go right straight to the Link server and say, so what is his status? And it could be he's active because he's touched his keyboard. He might have put himself in Do Not Disturb or away, or it could be it's timed out, and so we know he's not at his desk. We read that status out to determine how to handle the call and what prompts to play to the caller. But we don't actually federate in the sense of putting our information back in.
Okay, the next question is about Adam. Is this new, or is it a renamed personal assistant?
And the answer is both. So certainly if you have the full Adam suite, you have personal assistant. But we've added new things with Adam as well. A lot of this availability and context piece is new. Now, you could order, let's say you already have a call express system. If a user has a personal assistant license, you have speech on the platform, and they have a unified messaging license, they have the full Adam feature set. So you'd have to go to the latest and greatest version of software, 8.5, and you could have everything we talked about and never actually purchase Adam. You could take the licenses you have already and fill them in. What Atom is from a purchase point of view is if you want to equip new users, we have an Atom license that's kind of a reduced package license as well. So it's kind of a combination of existing, new, plus a marketing program.
Great. Okay, the next question is, can you interrupt the system when they're speaking an email and have it skip to the next email?
Yes, although I want to caveat that by saying, depending on how you're connected to the system. For example, if you have Bluetooth in your car and you're rolling down the road and it's noisy, I will tell you right now, every single time you aren't going to be able to do that. I have to say that 2 or 3 times in my car. I have a kind of an SUV that's very noisy inside. If I have my Bluetooth headset on, it works perfect. If I'm using the Bluetooth in the car because of the background noise, it doesn't work great. Now, from a normal, let's say I'm sitting somewhere, I have my headset on my mobile phone, I'm sitting waiting for an airplane, then yes, you can interrupt the email, no problem. You can skip ahead in the email, skip back in the email, skip to the next message. All of that can be done.
Okay, next question. Is Atom compatible with Exchange 2012?
2012, yes. And Office 365 as well.
Okay. The next question is, which software release of CX will support multi-language speech?
8.5, which is the new one that's due out in 2 or 3 weeks. I would have to get you the date. It's basically gone through testing and it's being packaged up as we speak.
Okay, the next question is, what reporting functionality is available for the auto attendant?
So this is kind of a mixed answer. We have great auto attendant functionality in terms of, how many people hit that and everything else. What we don't have is a very, very powerful set of reports for speech automated attendant. We have the tools. So let's say you deploy this and you have somebody that's having a problem and they say every time I call in and do this feature it doesn't work. We have the tools to get to that low-level information, find that problem, and solve it. We haven't yet finished the customer-facing tool that would make that easier for you to use. The tools we have now are very much an engineering-level tool. So it's kind of, for speech, we don't have a real powerful tool set yet. For DTMF, you can go in and find out how many times on Friday somebody pushed the button 5 on a particular menu.
Okay, the next question. How do you expect the incoming outside caller to know what commands to use?
So there's the simple answer to that is almost always either it's prompted or it's only a name. So let me give you an example. If you just turned on Speech Automated Attendant and used the default menu that's there, it'll say, please say the first and last name or the department name that you're trying to reach. So that's all they have to know. If you're not doing anything else, there's no other commands. Now, if they say, it will come back and say, I'm sorry, I did not understand that, please, and then it'll give them options. If what you want is them to know that at night, the night menu will let them transfer to the guard shack, then in the greeting you say, please say the first and last name of the person you're trying to reach, or guard shack to reach the guard on duty. Outside the application is fairly limited. The outside caller interface is a perfect example. After you transfer, if you don't get through, we will tell you, please say, operator, try another person. I mean, we're very clear that the outside world calling in has not had any training. Even the internal people, if I call in and I say, I can't remember how to get to my calendar, you can say help, and they'll come back and say, there are help categories. Say help, calendar, help, messaging, help, calendar. You can say, and I mean, so it's all built in for the users as well.
Okay, great. Next question's a little bit specific. It says, we have an auto attendant and we want a cleaner way to notify customers of outages and emergency-related events when they access our IT auto attendant. What are some of the new features that handle emergency messages?
So there's a couple of things we do in that area. Because of our business process piece, you can actually write a custom app that goes out and let's say you have an outage database and you mark certain entries critical. It can actually, when a call comes in, it can go to the critical database, find out if there's anything in it, create a text message saying, please be aware that network connections to building C are down, blah, 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 and it can read those back to people. So anything along those lines is going to be a custom app, but remember, we can use text-to-speech to read things, and we can make decisions when a call comes in. We can say, really quickly, go out and see if this database has any entries. If it does, then go ahead and play them to the callers. So we can construct any scenario that they can describe.
Okay, great. That's actually all the questions that we have. Again, we wanted to remind everyone that we will be sending out the presentation slides. So just look for an email from AVST. And as well as we will send out a recording link once that's available. Again, if you have any comments or questions or feedback, you can always email us at info@avst.com. And Neil, did you have anything to add?
I just want to say, add my thanks. I appreciate when people come to these webinars. This one ran a little longer than some of our other ones, but there was an awful lot of material. So let us know. If this is good for you, let us know that. If it wasn't good, if there's something else you want to see covered, if you let us know, we will respond. For people that ask for specific things, we'll respond offline, but we've actually built webinars and offered them based on people telling us the kind of things they really like to see more of. So if you just keep telling us what you want, we'll keep delivering it.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.